Elias Vale had not walked into the Cottonwood Fork School yard in 2 years, not since the bell rope had snapped in his hand after his sister's funeral, and the little room had gone quiet for good. He came that morning because the school board had sent word that a teacher was arriving, and because his sister's 2 children had spent another winter learning their letters from flour sacks and fence brands. He told himself he only meant to stand at the rail, listen, and leave before anyone asked him to sit inside. Then Judson Pike held up $2 and made the whole yard laugh. "That is what the board is owed for her supper and cot," Pike said. $2. If any man wants to waste it on a woman too tall to fit behind a school desk, he may have her application and her trouble together. Otherwise, she can ride on to the mine camp and wash shirts for men who will not care how high she stands. The woman stood beside the school steps with her carpetbag in one hand and a rolled certificate in the other. She was tall, yes, taller than most women in Cottonwood Fork and some men besides. Her brown dress was travel-worn at the hem. Her dark blonde hair was pinned plain under a narrow hat. She did not lower her eyes when the men laughed. But Elias saw the whiteness around her fingers on that certificate. Mrs. Bell, the preacher's wife, stood close enough to speak. She looked at the ground instead. Pike flicked one of the dollars with his thumb. "Well, nobody wants the tall schoolmarm." Elias stepped off the fence rail. The laughter thinned before he reached the steps. He was not a rich man, and he was not a town man, but every person in that yard knew the Vale brand fed half the freight teams that came through in winter. They also knew he had not smiled since fever took his sister, Anna, and her husband out beyond the North Ridge. He took $2 from his vest and dropped them into the tin collection box hard enough to make the coins jump. "There," he said, "the board is paid, now hand Miss." "Ruth Larkin," the woman said before Pike could answer. Her voice shook once and then steadied. "Miss Ruth Larkin, I am 30 years old, certified in Kansas and Nebraska, and I did not come here to be sold." Elias looked at her then, truly looked. Not at her height, not at the dust on her dress. At the fire she was holding behind her teeth so it would not burn the wrong person. "No, ma'am," he said, "you did not. I paid a fee that never should have been put on you. I did not pay for you." The yard went so quiet the old bell stirred in the wind and gave one cracked knock against its frame. Pike's mouth tightened. "Vale, this is school business." "Then conduct it like school business," Elias said, "not a cattle bid." Ruth's eyes moved to him, cautious and sharp. She had probably heard men make noble speeches before, and some of them had likely used the speech as a rope. Elias knew the look because he had seen it in skittish horses and in his own mirror. "I can repay the $2, she said. "You can if you want," Elias said, "or you can let the board choke on the shame of taking it." That brought one small gasp from Mrs. Bell. If you enjoy clean, romantic Wild West stories about unwanted women finding a true home, subscribe and ride along for the next frontier romance. Pike snapped Ruth's rolled certificate from her hand. "The board has not accepted this woman. Her size is not the issue, of course. Her references are incomplete. Her lodging is unsettled, and her manner is already unsuitable." Ruth reached for the certificate, but Pike lifted it out of reach with a smile that made Elias' hands close. "Give it back," Elias said. "You want a teacher so badly?" Pike asked. "Put her on your dead school ground. The Vale place still has 4 walls and a bell if the rats have not eaten them, but do not expect district money. Not for her. Not for Anna Vale's 2 charity children either. The board will place them where they can be properly managed." Elias felt the yard tilt under him. Anna's children, Millie and Tom, his sister's girl and boy who slept in the small room off his kitchen and still called him Mr. Elias when fear got hold of them. He had fed them, clothed them, kept them alive. He had not known how to be family to them without remembering every person he had failed to save. Ruth saw his face change. Her own anger shifted, not gone, but widened enough to include him. Pike noticed too and smiled harder. "You have not filed final guardianship, Vale. The stipend comes through the school committee until you do. Best not make enemies of the committee." There it was, the real thing. Not Ruth's height, not her supper fee, control. Elias held out his hand, her certificate. Pike hesitated because the yard was watching now. He gave the paper back with 2 fingers, as if it were dirty. Ruth took it and tucked it against her ribs. "Miss Larkin," Elias said, keeping his voice even, "my sister's children need a teacher. The Old Vale schoolhouse needs a roof patch and sweeping. I can offer wages for a month, a locked room in the schoolhouse until you choose better lodging, meals at my table if you wish them, and a wagon to the rail any day you ask." Ruth searched his face. "And what would you want for that?" "Children who can read more than feed labels," he said, "and a town that learns a woman is not made smaller because a fool cannot look her in the eye." The corner of her mouth moved like she almost forgot not to smile. "A month," she said. "A month," he agreed. Pike laughed once, but it had lost its crowd. "Take care, Vale. You may find $2 is the cheapest part of her." Ruth turned to him before Elias could. "And you may find I am not cheap at all." That was the first moment Elias wanted to laugh in 2 years. He did not, but he picked up Ruth's carpetbag before Pike could touch it, and he carried it to his wagon in full view of the yard. The Vale Ranch lay 6 miles north of Cottonwood Fork, where the grass grew short and silver, and the wind dragged dust along the wagon ruts like a warning. Ruth sat on the wagon seat with her certificate in her lap, and her shoulders straight enough to look painful. Elias did not ask her to explain herself. He knew the cruelty of being asked to bleed politely for strangers. After the first mile, she said, "Is it true about the children?" "Yes. Your sisters. Anna's Millie is 9, Tom is 7. And you have not filed guardianship." The reins creaked in his hands. "I signed the first papers, never finished the hearing." "Why?" He looked toward the ridge, where a line of cottonwoods marked the creek. "Because the day I went to town to finish it, Mrs. Bell had Anna's Bible under her arm and told me I ought to let a proper family take them. I turned around before I said something that would shame Anna's name." Ruth was quiet for a long time. "I know what it is to be measured by a room before you speak," she said. He glanced at her. "Because of your height." "Because of my height. Because I am unmarried at 30. Because I teach older boys to cipher and expect them to answer respectfully. Because I once took a switch from a schoolmaster's hand and broke it over my knee." That time Elias did laugh, low and surprised. Ruth looked startled by the sound. "I would have paid $2 to see that," he said. Her face softened, and the wind took a loose strand of her hair across her cheek. Elias looked away before he stared too long. Admiration was one thing. Wanting to keep looking was another, and dangerous for a man who had offered safety. "I will repay you," she said. "I know. You do not know me. I know you stood straight when Pike wanted you bent." She folded her hands over the certificate. "That is not enough to know." "No," he said, "but it is enough to begin." The ranch house came into view near noon, low and weathered, with a barn, a smokehouse, and the abandoned schoolhouse beyond the windmill. The schoolhouse looked smaller than Ruth expected. Its whitewash had peeled in strips. One shutter hung crooked. The bell frame leaned as if tired of waiting. 2 children stood by the porch pump. The girl held a slate to her chest. The boy held a wooden horse with one missing wheel. They did not run to Elias. They watched him as children watch whether that might turn. Elias climbed down first. "Millie, Tom, this is Miss Larkin. She came to teach for a month." Tom whispered, "She's tall." Millie elbowed him, but Ruth crouched until her eyes were nearly level with his. "I am," she said. "That means I can reach high shelves, see over rude men's hats, and write at the top of a blackboard without standing on a chair." Tom considered this. "Can you read a feed bill?" If the man who wrote it used numbers instead of chicken tracks. Millie made a small sound, not a laugh exactly, but the first cousin of one. Elias felt it strike him in the ribs. Ruth looked toward the schoolhouse. "May I see it?" He led her there himself, though every step tightened old grief around his lungs. Inside, dust lay thick over the benches. A mouse had chewed one corner of the primer shelf. The blackboard was gray with age. On the back wall, Anna's careful handwriting still marked the alphabet in faded chalk. Ruth saw it and stopped. "Your sister taught here. Before she married, after when the district could not keep a teacher. She had a good hand. She had patience too, more than I did." Ruth set her carpetbag on a bench. Patience is not born in some people and missing in others. It is practiced. He looked at the dusty room, the broken rope, the years he had let sit idle because touching them hurt. I am out of practice. Then this is a schoolhouse, she said. You may learn. No one had spoken to him like that in 2 years. Not gently, not cruelly, simply as if he were still living and could be expected to improve. He wanted to resent it. Instead, he found himself picking up a broom. By sundown, the room had changed. Not fixed, not yet, but changed. Millie beat dust from the erasers with fierce concentration. Tom carried dead mice nests out on a shovel and announced each trip like a military dispatch. Ruth washed the blackboard and rewrote Anna's alphabet underneath the old marks instead of over them. Elias noticed that and had to step outside. Ruth followed after a minute. She did not crowd him. She stood at the threshold with the wash rag in her hand. I did not mean to hurt you, she said. You didn't. That is often what people say when they are hurt. He leaned against the porch post. You kept her letters. A teacher's hand should not erase another teacher unless she must. He looked at her then, and there was no wind, no town, no Pike. Just a tall woman in a dusty doorway holding a rag like a banner of peace. Anna would have liked you, he said. Ruth's expression changed, careful and warm at once. I would have tried to deserve it. He had to look away again because wanting had come up on him quiet. Not the wild wanting men made jokes about outside saloons. A steadier thing. He wanted to hear her answer questions at his table. He wanted the children to make that almost laugh again. He wanted the schoolhouse door open tomorrow and the day after. He wanted too much too soon. So he said only, supper will be ready. You can eat with us or I can bring a plate here. With you, she said, then added quickly, with the children. A teacher should know her pupils. Of course. But the color rose in her face, and Elias understood he was not the only one walking a narrow rail. The next morning, Ruth rang no bell because the rope was still broken. She stood in the schoolhouse doorway and clapped her hands 3 times. Millie and Tom came. So did 2 ranch hands who pretended they were only fixing a gate nearby. By noon, 3 neighboring children had appeared at the fence. Ruth did not coax them. She wrote a column of numbers on the board and said, if a storekeeper offers 5 pounds of flour at one price and 10 pounds at another, how do you know whether he cheats you? The ranch hands stopped pretending. Elias, mending harness by the door, saw exactly when the lesson caught. It was not fancy. It was not soft. It was useful. Ruth made every number mean bread, wages, seed, or a winter coat. She made Tom stand and read a line without laughing when he stumbled. She made Millie explain a sum twice because the first answer was right but the courage behind it was missing. When the lesson ended, one ranch hand removed his hat. Miss Larkin, he said, my boy could use that kind of figuring. Then send him tomorrow with clean hands and a slate, Ruth said. The man grinned. He has a slate, hands are doubtful. I accept doubtful hands if the mind is awake. Elias watched the hand ride away and felt something dangerous gather in him. Hope, maybe. Hope was dangerous because it asked a man to build something grief could burn down. At dusk, Pike arrived with a folded notice nailed to a board. He did not come alone. Mrs. Bell rode beside him in a small buggy, and behind them came 2 school trustees who looked as though they wished they had chosen any other errand. Pike nailed the notice to the Vale schoolhouse post without asking. Ruth read it aloud before Elias could stop her. Notice of unapproved instruction. Children taught outside district authority may lose stipend standing. Miss Ruth Larkin is not certified by Cottonwood Fork Board and is not recommended for moral or practical instruction. Tom's face went pale. Millie moved closer to Ruth without seeming to know she had done it. Elias stepped forward. Take it down. Pike tapped the paper. You may teach your own kin if you ever become legal kin. Others are district children. Their funds pass through us. Their futures pass through us. Ruth's chin lifted. Their minds do not. Pike smiled at the trustees. Hear that? A month here and she already sets herself over law. Mrs. Bell would not meet Ruth's eyes. Ruth looked at her. You saw what he did yesterday. You know I did not ask for board charity. Mrs. Bell's gloved hands tightened. Judson says the records are irregular. Judson made them irregular, Ruth said. One trustee muttered, best not make a scene. Elias almost laughed at that. The scene had been made when Pike priced a woman like damaged freight. Pike pulled a small account book from his coat. Until the board meets, the orphan stipend remains frozen. Vale, your store credit depends on district confidence. Your grazing renewal comes through men who trust my reports. Do not spend your dead sister's name buying trouble. They're not paper alone, a live knife. Elias felt Ruth watching him. He could tell her to go. He could spare the ranch. He could send her to Denver, finish guardianship quietly, and let Pike keep the town. Instead, he took the notice from the post, folded it once, and put it in his pocket. My sister's name is why I am buying trouble, he said. The trustees stared. Pike's smile died. Ruth did not thank Elias. That would have made the moment too small. She turned to the children and said, class begins at 8. Bring the notice if you like, Mr. Pike. We can use it for spelling. That night, Elias found Ruth in the schoolhouse with a hammer, trying to mend a bench by lamplight. He stood at the door for a while before she noticed him. I could do that, he said. You could, she answered, striking a nail crooked. But I am angry and the bench is available. He crossed the room and held the board steady. She pulled the nail, reset it, and tried again. For more clean Western romance, unwanted brides, brave schoolteachers, and lonely ranchers finding home, subscribe to the channel. The nail went in straight. You should have told me about the stipend, she said. I should have filed guardianship. Why didn't you, truly? He rubbed his thumb along the bench edge. Because if I signed as their guardian, then I was saying Anna was not coming back. Ruth's hammer lowered. And if I did not sign, he said, I could pretend I was only keeping them until I figured out how to be what they needed. Children know when they are being kept like borrowed tools. The words struck clean and hard. He did not defend himself. I know, he said. Ruth's anger shifted into sorrow. I should not have said it so sharply. Yes, you should. She sat on the bench they were mending. In the lamplight, she looked tired enough to fold and too proud to do it. People think tall women do not need gentleness, she said. They look up and decide we must be hard all the way through. I learned to sound certain because uncertain women are corrected, but tall, uncertain women are mocked. Elias sat at the other end of the bench, leaving space enough that no one could mistake his nearness for a claim. You were not mocked today, he said, not by everyone. No, today I was threatened with official language. It is a promotion of sorts. He smiled despite himself. She looked down at the hammer. There is a Denver academy that might take me. A friend wrote last month. I did not answer because I wanted a frontier school of my own. Foolish, perhaps. Not foolish. You cannot know that. I know what the room sounded like when Tom read. Her eyes softened. He wanted to reach for her hand. He did not. He set his palm on the bench between them, open. After a moment, she set her own hand beside his, not touching, close enough that the warmth was a decision. If you go to Denver, he said, I will hitch the wagon myself. And if I stay? His throat tightened. Then I will try to deserve that, too. Outside, the old bell knocked once in the wind. The next 3 days turned the Vale schoolhouse into the busiest place north of town. Children came first in 2s and 3s, then in a line that made Pike's notice look lonely on the post. Ruth taught sums with seed corn, spelling with ranch tools, geography by making the children draw the creek and ridge from memory. She made the older boys read aloud to the younger ones. She made the younger ones stand when they answered so their voices learned to take up space. Elias saw the change in his own house most sharply. Millie began correcting his store figures at supper. Tom wrote his name on every scrap of paper he could find, including the side of the kindling box. Ruth ate at the table because Elias asked every night, and because every night she chose yes. He never sat too close. He never touched her except once when the wind took the schoolhouse door and she stumbled back from it. His hand closed around her elbow, steady and quick, and he let go as soon as she had her balance. That small touch followed him for hours. It followed Ruth too. He knew because she avoided looking at him through supper, then looked at him when she thought he was not watching. Pike changed tactics on Friday. He came while Elias was checking fence on the east quarter. He brought a wagon and 2 men from town. Ruth was in the yard with 12 children, teaching them to measure shadow by noon. Pike walked straight past the lesson and took the attendance roll from her hand. "These names are district property," he said. Ruth held out her hand. "The children are not. You have no standing to keep a roll. You have no standing to collect names. You have no standing to call this school." Tom stood up. "She is our teacher." Pike looked at him with a mildness that was worse than anger. "You are not the judge of that, boy. Neither is your uncle unless he finishes what he has avoided." Ruth stepped between Pike and Tom. "You will not use a child to wound a man who is absent." Pike's eyes brightened. He had found the tender place. "Absent? Your protector leaves you alone quickly for a man so eager to spend money on you." Several children went still. Ruth felt the old heat rise in her face. "Mr. Vale bought no part of me." "That is not how the town tells it." "Then the town lies cheaply." Pike turned to the 2 men. "Load the extra benches. They belong to the district store." The benches were rough things Elias had pulled from the abandoned church shed and repaired at night. But Pike had a receipt from the district store for old lumber. He waved it once, enough to make the men obey, not enough for Ruth to read. Paper becoming hands, paper becoming theft. Ruth did not wrestle them. She did something worse for Pike. She called the children to order. "Class," she said, voice ringing across the yard, "today's lesson has changed. When a person with power takes what others have repaired, what must witnesses do?" Millie stood, trembling. "Tell what they saw." "Good, Tom. Remember who took it." "Good, Daniel." A neighbor boy swallowed. "Decide if you're helping him by staying quiet." One of Pike's men stopped with a bench in his hands. Pike flushed. "You are poisoning them." "No," Ruth said. "I am teaching citizenship." By the time Elias rode in, the wagon held 6 benches and Pike held the attendance roll. Ruth stood with 12 children behind her and no fear left on her face, only fury made useful. Elias swung down from the saddle. "Put them back." Pike tucked the roll into his coat. "File your guardianship, renew your lease, pay district lumber fees, and perhaps we will discuss it. Until then, I will not have this woman making a little kingdom out of your grief." Elias moved so fast Pike's men backed up. He stopped short of touching Pike, because touching him would give him exactly the story he wanted. "You have until Monday," Pike said. "The board meets at the old schoolhouse. Bring your apology, your payment, and Miss Larkin's promise to leave, or I petition to place Anna's children in town homes before winter." Ruth heard Millie make a small sound behind her. Elias heard it too. His face changed in a way Ruth could not read. Not anger, not only, something like a door opening on a dark room. Pike climbed into the wagon. $2 bought you trouble, Vale. Monday tells whether you can afford the rest." When the wagon left, the yard looked stripped. Children stood where benches had been. Dust moved through empty spaces. Elias walked to Ruth. "Are you hurt?" "No." "The children." Frightened, angry, learning. His mouth twitched, but the smile did not hold. "Denver," he said, "you told me there was a place." Ruth stared at him. "I am not sending you," he said quickly. "I am saying if you want it, I will not let pride keep you in Pike's reach." She looked at the children, at the empty schoolhouse, at the road where Pike's wagon had taken the benches. A safe path had opened. She could take it. She could teach in clean rooms with boards that did not price women in public. She could stop fighting men who turned committees into cages. Then Tom picked up a broken chalk stub from the dust and held it out to her. Ruth did not take it right away. She made herself look at Elias first, because the choice could not be made from pity for children alone. "If I stay," she said, "I stay as teacher, not rescue." "Yes." "I choose the lessons." "Yes." "I collect my wages from families or from you until families can pay, not as charity." "Yes." "And if I leave later, no one says I betrayed the children." The words hurt him, she saw it. He answered anyway. No one, not while I breathe. She took the chalk from Tom. Then class continues under the cottonwoods. She did not wait for permission to make it true. Ruth walked to the line of cottonwoods that shaded the creek bend and pointed to the cleanest patch of ground. Older pupils gather flat stones. Younger pupils find sticks as long as your forearm. No one crosses the creek without an adult. We will build our own desks if Mr. Pike is short of courage and furniture. The children scattered with the relief of being given work instead of fear. Millie wiped her face with both sleeves and began choosing stones by size. Tom tried to drag a branch twice as long as himself, until one of the ranch hands lifted the far end and pretended Tom was doing most of the labor. Elias watched Ruth turn a stripped yard into a school again within 10 minutes. That was the part Pike did not understand. He thought power lived in locks, rolls, fees, and boards. Ruth carried it in the way she made frightened people useful to one another. She drew numbers in the dirt with the broken chalk. When the chalk wore down, she used a stick. When the wind blurred the lines, she made the children rebuild them with pebbles. If 6 benches are taken, she asked, and 12 children still need places, how many children share each blanket? 4, Tom said too quickly. Ruth lifted an eyebrow. Millie whispered 2. Tom frowned at the blanket, then the children, then the empty yard. 2, he corrected, unless Daniel takes up too much space. Daniel kicked dust at him, and the class laughed. The laughter carried across the yard to Elias. It was ordinary, which made it nearly unbearable. There had been so little ordinary joy on the Vale place that he did not know what to do with it except stand still and let it hurt. Ruth saw him standing apart and called, "Mr. Vale, if you mean to look solemn, you may at least do it while holding the slate board." The children laughed harder. Elias took the board from the wagon and set it against a cottonwood trunk. "Yes, ma'am." The words came out lighter than he expected. Ruth heard it. Her eyes met his for one quick second, warm and startled before she returned to the lesson. That afternoon, while the children copied sums, a boy rode in from town with a letter for Ruth. He was the telegraph operator's nephew, thin as a rail and proud of being trusted with sealed paper. Ruth took the envelope and went still when she saw the handwriting. Elias was tightening a wheel bolt nearby. He did not ask. He saw her thumb press the corner once before she opened it. Denver Academy for Girls had a place. The old friend she mentioned had spoken for her. The position paid more than Cottonwood Fork could dream of paying. It included a room, coal in winter, and a classroom with glass windows that shut properly. Ruth read the letter twice. The children watched because children notice every adult silence. Elias turned away first. He had promised her a road out. A promise did not become false because it hurt. "Good news?" he asked. Ruth folded the page slowly. "Safe news." He nodded. "Those are close kin." "Not always." He could have told her Cottonwood Fork needed her more. He could have told her Millie would break if she left. He could have told her his house would go hollow again. Every one of those things might be true, and everyone would turn need into a chain. "When would they expect you?" he asked. "By next Friday." "I can take you to the rail on Thursday." That answer cost him. Ruth saw the cost cross his face before he mastered it, and because he mastered it instead of handing it to her, something in her own guarded heart shifted. "You would do that?" she asked. "I said I would." Men say many things before the price appears. Then this is the price appearing. She looked down at the letter. "I thought I wanted someone to fight for me." He set the wrench in the wagon box. "I can fight Pike. I can fight fire. I cannot fight your freedom and call it love." The words sat between them. Love had not been offered, not yet, but the shape of it had stepped into the shade and stood there breathing. Ruth folded the letter into her pocket. "Class," she called, voice a little rough, "write this sentence. A safe road is only a gift if the gate opens both ways." Millie looked at Elias after she wrote it. He looked back and understood his niece had just learned more than grammar. Elias turned away for a moment. When he turned back, his eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. "I'll bring planks for seats." "No," Ruth said. Bring blankets. If Pike wants to steal benches, let him explain why children learned better on the ground. Pike did not wait until Monday to press the wound. Saturday morning, the storekeeper refused Elias' order for flour, lamp oil, and slate pencils. He did not look happy about it. He kept rubbing his thumb along the edge of the counter while Ruth stood behind Elias with Millie and Tom. Judson says district accounts tied to the Vale place are unsettled, the storekeeper said. He says any man extending credit to you before the board meeting risks not being paid out of school allotments. Elias laid cash on the counter. The storekeeper looked at it, then at the window where Pike's buggy stood across the street. He also says cash orders can wait until after Monday. Ruth felt Tom's hand slip into her skirt fold. She did not touch his head. She wanted to. Instead, she let him choose the nearness without making him the center of the fight. Elias spoke quietly. Are you refusing legal coin? I am asking you to come back Monday. The children need pencils today. The storekeeper swallowed. I know. Ruth stepped forward. May I buy chalk? He looked miserable. Miss Larkin. Not on district account, not on Vale credit with my own money. She placed 20 cents on the counter. It was not much, but it was hers, saved from mending a ranch hand's torn coat in the evenings. The storekeeper's eyes flicked to Pike's buggy again. I cannot. Something inside Elias went very still. He gathered his coins back. He did not threaten. He did not shout. He looked at the storekeeper with a disappointment so plain that the man's face reddened. Then you are not waiting for the board, Elias said. You are obeying Judson Pike before he even speaks. Outside, Ruth stopped on the walk. Pike tipped his hat from his buggy. You see, he called, trouble is expensive. $2 was merely the introduction. Elias took one step toward him. Ruth caught his sleeve, not to stop his anger, but to turn it. Mr. Vale, she said, loud enough for the boardwalk to hear, with the old charcoal from your branding pit right on a slate board. He looked at her, then he understood. It would, and could smooth creek stones hold figures. Better than store slate if the student is stubborn. Then we are supplied. Pike's smile faded because she had turned denial into lesson again. The storekeeper opened the door behind them. Elias. Elias did not turn. Ruth did. When you decide whether you run a store or a fear closet, send word. Until then, the children will learn without your pencils. It was a sharp thing to say. She did not regret it. That afternoon, Elias took a hammer, a sack, and Tom to the dry wash where flat shale broke from the bank. He let the boy choose stones and showed him how to smooth the edges without cutting his hands. It would have been easier to do it alone. He did not. Ruth watched from the cottonwoods as Elias let Tom be awkward, impatient, wrong, and useful. Millie sat beside Ruth with the Denver letter on her mind, though she never named it. Do teachers in Denver have bells? Millie asked. Yes. Glass windows. Likely. Do they have girls who already read whole books? Some. Millie drew a line in the dirt with a stick. You would like that. Ruth looked at the girl. I might. Would you forget our sums? No. Would Uncle Elias? The question was not about sums. Ruth kept her voice honest. No, but forgetting is not the only way people lose one another. Millie's eyes filled. He forgot to be our uncle. Ruth's heart tightened. This was where a weaker story would make the child heal the man by being sweet. Millie was not sweet in that moment. She was truthful. Then he must remember by action, Ruth said, not by making you forgive him quickly. Millie wiped her face hard. Good. Later, Ruth told Elias what Millie had said. She did it after supper, outside by the pump, where the children could not hear. He listened without interrupting. Every sentence landed visibly. When Ruth finished, he gripped the pump handle and bowed his head. Thank you for telling me, he said. It hurt you. It should. Do not turn the hurt into distance. He looked toward the house where lamplight showed two small shadows moving behind the curtain. I will sit with them tonight, if they let me. And if they do not, then I will sit outside the door until they believe I meant it. That was the adult arc Ruth needed to see. Not grand protection, not righteous anger. A man willing to remain present after he had been named wrong. He looked back at her. Will you think less of me if they do not forgive me soon? No, she said. I will think more of you if you stop asking children to make your guilt comfortable. He breathed out once, almost a laugh and almost a wound. Strict teacher, he said. Fair rates, she answered. By Monday morning, half the North Valley knew there would be a meeting at the abandoned schoolhouse. Pike had meant to gather shame. Ruth meant to gather witnesses. The day began hot and mean. Dust hung low over the ridges. Elias hitched the wagon before dawn and drove Ruth, Millie, Tom, 3 rolled blankets, 2 water barrels, and a slate board made from painted scrap wood to the schoolhouse yard. He wore his black hat and his old Sunday coat. Ruth wore her brown dress brushed clean, a white collar she had washed and pressed flat, and the narrow hat that made her look taller, not smaller. If Cottonwood Fork wanted to stare, she would give them something upright to stare at. Families came in wagons and on foot. Some stood near Ruth, others stayed closer to Pike. Mrs. Bell arrived with the church ladies and would not look at the schoolhouse door. Pike came last, carrying the attendance roll he had taken and the schoolhouse key on a ribbon. He had dressed as if for church. His smile was polished. Before this disorder continues, he announced, the board will establish who has authority. Ruth stepped forward. Authority to do what? Teach children or frighten them? A murmur moved through the yard. Pike held up the roll. Authority to protect them from unapproved influence. Then open the schoolhouse, Ruth said. Let them read, let them cipher, let their parents hear what they have learned. Pike's smile thinned. He had expected pleading, not a test. This building is district property. So are the benches you took. One of Pike's own wagon men looked down. Before Pike could answer, wind pushed over the yard carrying a bitter smell. Elias turned toward the north ridge. Smoke. Not a wall of flame yet. A brown smear low in the grass where the old fence met dry weeds. The kind of grass fire that could crawl for an hour, then run faster than a horse when the wind shifted. Several men saw it at once. Fire on the ridge, Elias called. The meeting broke into noise. Pike grabbed the schoolhouse key ribbon at his chest as if it mattered. The well road runs behind the school, Elias said. Open the gate. Pike stepped back. That road crosses district land under board control. Wagons will tear it up. For one stunned second, no one moved. Ruth did. She climbed onto the schoolhouse step and clapped 3 times, the way she had all week. The children turned toward her by habit. Class, she called, loud enough for every adult to hear. What did we learn about fire breaks and wind? Millie, pale but clear, answered first. Clear a line wider than the flame can jump. Tom. Wet sacks on the near edge, dirt on sparks. Daniel. Move animals before smoke turns them. Ruth pointed to the water barrels. Older children soak blankets and sacks. Younger ones carry cups only if your parents say yes. Adults, if you want your fences and homes, stop asking Mr. Pike for permission to save them. The yard moved. Not all at once, then fast. Elias felt the turn happen. Men who had been waiting for orders ran for shovels. Women pulled quilts from wagon boxes. Children formed lines because Ruth named them and gave them jobs small enough to do safely. No child ran toward flame. No one needed to. Ruth kept them at the wet line near the yard while adults cut the brake. Pike shouted, "This meeting is not adjourned." No one cared. He grabbed the arm of one father whose boy had joined the water line. Your stipend will be reviewed. The man pulled free. Review it after my barn is standing. Elias rode hard to the well road gate. Pike had locked it with the school keys mate, a chain looped through the hinge. Elias could break it. He wanted to. Ruth saw him reach for the axe in the wagon. Elias, she called. He looked back. She did not say do not. She said, if you break it, he makes the story about damage. Pike heard and smiled, thinking she had stopped him. Ruth turned to the crowd. Who owns the North Water Lane by use? A gray-haired ranch wife lifted her hand. All of us, we cut it in the drought year. My husband laid the first stone." "Then who can open it?" Ruth asked. The woman walked past Pike, took a spare iron pin from her wagon, and knocked the chain loose from the rotted hinge without breaking the lock at all. The gate swung open. Pike's mouth fell open. A sound rose from the yard, not cheering, not yet. Recognition. Elias drove the first wagon through, others followed. Within minutes, men were cutting a dark line through the grass while Ruth kept the children passing water to the safe edge. Smoke stung eyes. Heat pushed hard. Once a spark caught the corner of a quilt, and Ruth stamped it out before the child holding the other end could panic. Elias saw that, and his heart lurched so violently he nearly dropped his shovel. He wanted her away from danger. He wanted to wrap the whole world in wet canvas before it touched her, but she was not his to move like furniture. She was doing exactly what she had promised: teaching, leading, standing where others could become braver. The fire hit the brake and snarled along it. For 10 long minutes the yard fought smoke, sparks, and fear. Then the wind shifted east, the worst of the flame thinned, and the men beat the last tongues down into black grass. When it was done, everyone stood dirty and coughing, staring at the schoolhouse still standing. Ruth's face was streaked with soot. Her hat had fallen somewhere. She looked taller than ever. Tom ran toward Elias, then stopped as if remembering old distance. Elias opened his arms before fear could close them. The boy hit him hard around the waist. Millie came slower. Elias held out his other arm. She stepped into it, stiff at first, then shaking. Ruth watched him hold them. Her own eyes filled, but she looked away to give them privacy. Pike found his voice in the quiet after the fire. "A useful accident does not make a teacher lawful," he said. The yard turned on him, but he was not finished. He held up the stolen attendance roll, edges curled from smoke. "These names remain under board authority. Vale remains unfinished as guardian. Miss Larkin remains unapproved, and any family signing with her risks losing district standing." There was his post-exposure counter, not shouting alone, a real last reach for fear. Ruth walked to him. Elias started forward, then stopped because this turn belonged to her. "Mr. Pike," she said, "read the first name on that roll." He blinked. "What?" "You stole it, read it." "I will not be ordered by." "Read it," said the gray-haired ranch wife who had opened the gate. Pike looked around and saw the crowd no longer arranged behind him. He opened the roll. "Thomas Vale," he snapped. Tom straightened. "Second," Ruth said. "Millicent Vale." Millie lifted her chin. Ruth turned to Elias. She did not ask for romance in that look. She asked whether he would do the adult thing the children could not do for him. Elias removed his hat. "I am Elias Vale," he said, voice carrying over the burned grass. "Brother to Anna Vale Mercer, uncle to Thomas and Millicent. I have fed them and failed them in the same house. I have let grief stand where my name should have stood, no more." He walked to Pike, took a folded paper from his coat and held it up, not as magic proof, as a promise he had finally finished. "This is my guardianship petition, signed this morning before 2 witnesses and ready for filing. If the committee wants to challenge me in daylight. But you will not use my delay to move these children like account figures." Pike reached for the paper. Elias pulled it back. "No, you have held enough names." A few men murmured approval. Pike turned to the trustees. "You cannot allow this disorder." One trustee looked at the blackened ridge, then at Ruth, then at the children still holding wet cups. "Judson, she saved the school ground." "The fire did not ask for certification," Pike said. Ruth answered, "Neither did the children when they learned how to stop it." Mrs. Bell stepped forward then, pale as milk. "I saw him price her," she said. Pike wheeled on her. "Be quiet." She flinched but did not step back. "I saw him take the $2 and make it sound like she could be had. I saw him take her certificate. I said nothing because Judson promised the church school would receive the district readers if I helped keep this quiet." The church ladies stared at her. Mrs. Bell's voice broke, but she kept it loud. "I gave silence for books. That was my sin. I resigned from the school committee. I will tell Reverend Bell and the mothers what I did before supper." That was a cost, not enough to erase the harm, but real enough to begin repair. Pike's face reddened. "You foolish woman." Ruth's eyes flashed. Do not call her foolish because she found her courage late. Pike made his last mistake. He grabbed for the roll as if to tear it. Ruth caught the other end. For 1 second they stood with the names between them. Then Elias put his hand over Ruth's on the paper, not to take it from her, but to hold the line with her. "Let go," Elias said. Pike looked past him to the men he expected to obey. No one moved. The father he had threatened folded his arms. The gray-haired ranch wife stood in front of the well-rowed gate. One trustee removed the key ribbon from Pike's vest, slow and deliberate. "Until a proper vote," the trustee said, "you do not hold district keys." "You have no right," Pike spat. "Neither did you," the trustee said, "when you locked the water lane during a fire." The roll came free into Ruth's hands. The yard was silent, not soft silence, deciding silence. Ruth turned to the families. "I cannot promise district money today. I cannot promise new readers or clean benches. I can promise school tomorrow morning if you want it. Not under Mr. Pike. Not under fear. Under subscription until the law catches up with decency. Sign if you choose. Do not sign if you are frightened. But do not let him tell you that silence is safer for your children." Elias took off his glove and signed first, below Tom and Millie's names, as guardian. Then he laid a silver dollar beside the roll, not $2, one, a first week's tuition the same as any other family could manage. "Paid to the teacher," he said, "not for her." Ruth looked at him, and the whole yard seemed to fall away from her face. The gray-haired ranch wife signed next, then the threatened father, then one of Pike's trustees, then a woman whose son had never spoken above a whisper until Ruth made him read seed numbers. Pike watched his authority leave one signature at a time. He tried to mount his buggy, but the livery man took the reins. "Your store account at my place is closed until the board sorts the stipend money," he said. "You can walk to town with the rest of us." Pike stared at him. "You would ruin yourself for her." The man looked at Ruth, then at the children, then at the black fire line. "No, I am done ruining myself for you." That was when Pike understood. He had lost more than an argument. He had lost obedience. The immediate fallout did not feel like a celebration. It felt like people waking stiff after sleeping too long in a bad position. Men returned borrowed tools. Women counted singed quilts. The trustee placed the school key on the desk inside the old building, where everyone could see it and no one treated it like a crown. The key still opened the schoolhouse, but it no longer opened people's fear. Mrs. Bell came to Ruth with her gloves twisted in both hands. "I will make public correction at church," she said. "Not just apology, correction. I will say you were wronged and I helped it by staying quiet." Ruth was tired enough that kindness would have been easier than justice. She did not choose easy. "And the committee books." Mrs. Bell swallowed. "I will give up my place until the mothers choose another. I will help copy readers by hand if you allow it, but I will not hold authority over this school." Ruth nodded once. "Then bring ink tomorrow. We need copies." Mrs. Bell pressed a hand to her mouth, nodded, and left crying. The crying was not the cost. The lost roll was. Ruth knew the difference now, and so did everyone close enough to hear. Elias found Ruth at the schoolhouse threshold after sunset. The children slept in the wagon under a blanket, worn out by smoke, fear, and victory. The yard smelled of wet ash. The bell rope still hung broken above them. "You should sit," Elias said. "If I sit, I may not rise until Wednesday." Then leaned. She looked at him, and after a moment leaned one shoulder against the doorframe. He stood beside her with a careful space between them. "I filed the petition before breakfast. I meant to tell you." "Why didn't you?" "I was afraid you would think I did it for you." "Didn't you?" He considered lying for his pride. He chose better. "Partly," he said, "but not to win you, to become the sort of man who could stand beside you without asking children to carry my courage." Ruth's eyes shone. "That is a better answer than no," she said. He reached into his coat and took out an envelope. "Denver Fair. Yours whether you stay the month or leave tomorrow, also your pay for the week from me until the subscription money is counted. You earned both." She took the envelope but did not open it, still making sure I can leave. "Yes, even after today. Especially after today. If you stay, I want the staying clean." The wind moved through the burned grass. Ruth looked at the yard where families had signed her roll and at the wagon where Millie and Tom slept with their heads tipped together. "I have been wanted before," she said. "For work, for order, for making a poor school respectable, for being useful enough that people forgot to be kind." Elias waited. She turned the envelope in her hands. "Today I was wanted and paid, that is new. You should have had it long before me." "Perhaps, but you were here when it mattered." He swallowed. "Ruth, when your month is done, I would like permission to ask you something not about school. Not today. Today you are tired, and I am not fool enough to mix gratitude with courtship." A smile touched her mouth. "What if I am fool enough to know the question? Then be wise enough to make me wait until you have slept." She laughed. The sound was low and weary and beautiful. He had heard people say laughter could fill a house. This did something harder. It made the empty places in him answer. "Ask after the first month," she said. "Ask when I have taken my wages, held my fare, and still walked to your porch by choice." "I can do that." "Can you?" He looked toward the children. "I am practicing patience. My teacher is strict." "Good," Ruth said. "She charges fair rates." The month did not become easy because one bad man lost his keys. Cottonwood Fork still had factions. Pike still wrote letters to county men. The schoolhouse still needed a roof patch, new slates, and half a dozen benches. But Pike had to write those letters without the roll, without the stipend purse, and without the quiet obedience that had once made him powerful. The county clerk did not arrive to save anyone. He sent back questions, delays, and a request for sworn statements. Ruth sent statements from parents, the trustee, Mrs. Bell, and Elias. More important, school continued while the clerk sharpened his pencils elsewhere. Pike tried to make that delay into victory. On the second Tuesday after the fire, he came to the schoolyard with a county envelope held high, saying there would be no final ruling for weeks. He had chosen morning recitation because he wanted the children to see his return. "You hear that?" he called from the gate. "Weeks, perhaps months. Until then this school remains irregular." Ruth set down her reader and walked to the porch. Elias was mending the roof with two fathers and heard the words from above. "Irregular means not shaped like you prefer," Ruth said. "It does not mean stopped." Pike shook the envelope. "No district funds will be released." Mrs. Albright rose from a bench near the door. She had come to hear her grandson read and had brought a basket of mending besides. "We released our own funds." "Subscription schools fail when enthusiasm cools," Pike said. The threatened father from the firebreak stepped forward with a small sack. "Then let us warm it." He emptied nails onto the porch. "For benches." The livery man came next with 2 hinges. "Charged to no one." The storekeeper stood at the back of the yard, shame-faced, holding a crate. Elias saw him and came down from the roof slowly. The storekeeper set the crate on the porch. "Slate pencils, chalk, lamp oil, flour." "I refused coin because I feared losing Pike's account," he said, voice rough. "I lost more than account when my boy came home saying he could learn without me. I will not ask credit for repair. I brought supplies paid from my pocket." Ruth looked to Elias, because Pike had used that store refusal to hurt him too. Elias did not make the man grovel. He did not smooth it away either. "My nephew spent Saturday breaking shale because you would not sell pencils," Elias said. "Remember that before you call this only a misunderstanding." The storekeeper nodded. "I will." Ruth accepted the crate. "Your boy may pass out pencils after noon if he knows his multiplication table." The man's mouth trembled with relief. "He will by noon if I have to learn it with him." The children laughed, and this time the laughter did not belong to Pike. Pike stepped through the gate. "You cannot build law from petty gifts." Ruth turned to the board. "Class new sentence." The children straightened. "A community," she said, writing each word large, "is not the man who holds the key. A community is the people who keep coming after the key fails. No one moved while she wrote it. Even Elias on the ground with his hammer in hand stood still. Pike looked around and saw again that the yard had learned to continue without him. That was the visible loss that mattered most. His key, his roll, his warnings, his envelope, all of it had become smaller than children's voices reciting a sentence he could not stop. He left before the lesson ended. He did not ride away grandly. He walked his horse backward because nobody moved aside quickly enough for him to turn, and the awkwardness of it made two older boys bite their lips so hard Ruth had to glare them back into manners. The school went on. The third week brought the hardest kind of test because there was no shouting in it. Rain came for 2 days, steady and cold, and turned the schoolyard to black mud. Children arrived wet to the knees. The roof patch failed over the back corner. Tom spilled ink on the only clean copy of the geography lesson and burst into angry tears before anyone could comfort him. Ruth nearly laughed, then nearly cried, and did neither. She set the ruined page by the stove and said, "Good, now we learn how rivers change maps." She made the ink stain into a lake, drew tributaries from the splatter, and had every child name a town that might grow beside such water. By noon, the ruined page had become the most popular lesson of the week. Elias watched from the doorway with 2 armloads of wood and understood something he had missed before. Ruth did not make family by preventing trouble. She made family by teaching people what to do with trouble after it arrived. That evening he found Millie at the kitchen table with Anna's Bible open beside her slate. She had written 3 names in a careful column: Anna Vale Mercer, Millicent Vale, Ruth Larkin. Then she had drawn a line under them and written home is a word with room. Elias sat across from her. "Did Miss Larkin tell you to write that?" Millie shook her head. She said not all sums use numbers. "That sounds like her." Millie stared at the slate. "If she goes to Denver, will the room get smaller?" Elias wanted to say no, because no was what adults said when children asked questions that could break them. But Ruth had taught under his roof long enough that lies felt cowardly. "Yes," he said, "it will feel smaller." Millie's chin trembled. "But we will not make her stay by needing her," he added. "That is not family, that is hunger dressed up." Millie looked at him then, startled by the plainness. He forced himself to continue. "If she stays, it must be because we made a place clean enough for her choice. If she leaves, we keep what she taught us and write letters if she allows." "Would you write?" "I would." "You hate letters." "I am practicing." Millie considered him with the severity of a child who has been disappointed and is deciding whether hope deserves another try. "Then write one now." So Elias did. He took a sheet from the shelf and wrote to the county clerk without Ruth's help, asking the guardianship hearing to be set and naming his own delay as his fault, not the children's. He wrote slowly. He blotted twice. Millie corrected one misspelled word and looked pleased about it. When Ruth came in to return a stack of copied readers, she found them bent over the page together. Elias looked up, embarrassed and proud in equal measure. "My spelling is being inspected." "Good," Ruth said. "No citizen should fear inspection by a 9-year-old with ink on her fingers." Millie smiled into the slate. After the child went to bed, Elias handed Ruth the letter. "Will it serve?" She read it by lamplight. It was not graceful. It was better than graceful. It was accountable. "It will serve," she said. He took the letter back but did not move away. "I wanted to ask you to stay tonight." Her eyes lifted. "Not like that," he said quickly, color rising. "I mean, I wanted to use the rain, the children, the school, every needy thing. I wanted to stack them at your feet and call it reason. And I wrote the clerk instead." Ruth folded her hands so she would not reach for his. "That may be the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me." He looked so startled she laughed. "Accountability?" he asked. "Restraint," she said. "Truth. A man choosing not to make his fear my cage." The kitchen went quiet. Rain ticked against the window. The children slept. The schoolhouse waited in the dark. Elias did not touch her. Ruth wished for one dangerous second that he would. Then she was glad he did not because the wanting stayed clean, and because she could feel her own answer growing without being forced. The next morning, he mailed the letter in front of her and the children, not as proof for a crowd, as practice. Millie watched the envelope leave his hand and stood a little closer to him on the walk back to the wagon. Ruth noticed that small step and stored it where no one could take it from her. It was not a child declaring a happy ending for adults. It was a child testing whether an adult's promise could hold weight. Elias did not make a speech about it. He only slowed his stride so Millie did not have to hurry, and that quiet adjustment told Ruth more than any vow. Pike tried once to stand outside the schoolyard and call the subscription unlawful. 3 mothers walked past him without stopping. The gray-haired ranch wife handed Ruth a sack of readers copied by lamplight. The livery man brought 2 benches and said they were paid from accounts Pike would no longer control. Ruth taught with smoke still dark on the ridge. Elias came every noon with water or lumber or children who had forgotten lunch. He did not hover. He did not claim. He fixed what needed fixing and left when Ruth's eyes told him the school was hers. That, more than anything, made her watch him. A man could rescue a woman once and still want applause forever. Elias kept choosing the harder thing. He risked his lease with Pike's friends. He filed guardianship and stood through every question it brought. He sat with Tom when the boy woke crying and did not send Millie to soothe him. He let the children be angry that he had waited so long to claim them. He did not defend himself from the truth. One evening, Ruth found him in the barn with Millie's slate in his hand. "She wrote Anna Vale Mercer," he said. "Then she wrote Millie Vale Mercer. Then she scratched out Mercer and cried. I did not know what to tell her." Ruth took the slate gently. "Do not tell her what name to keep. Tell her no name she loves has to be erased for another to fit." He closed his eyes. "You make it sound simple." "No," she said, "I make it sound possible." He looked at her then with such open tenderness that she forgot the next breath. "Ruth," he said. She lifted a hand. "Not yet." He nodded at once, though wanting stood plainly in his face. That was when she knew she could trust the wanting, not because it was small, because he could hold it without making it her burden. On the last Friday of her first month, the subscription families gathered at the schoolhouse with wages in coins, eggs, flour, mended cloth, and one promise of winter wood. Ruth counted every payment aloud and wrote every name on the board, not because she loved accounts, but because public payment was the answer to public insult. Pike stood across the road and watched. No one crossed to him. Mrs. Bell arrived carrying copied readers tied with string. She stopped at the board and said, loud enough for the mothers to hear, "Miss Larkin, I wrote my correction into the church minutes. I also wrote that I surrendered my committee place. Mrs. Albright has been elected in my stead." Mrs. Albright, the gray-haired ranch wife, snorted. Elected is a fine word for being cornered after prayer meeting. Ruth smiled. Schools have begun from less. Mrs. Bell set the readers on the desk. "May I help bind them, as helper only?" Ruth looked at Mrs. Albright. The older woman nodded once. "As helper," Ruth said. That was grace after cost, not instead of it. When the families left, Elias remained by the porch with Millie and Tom. Ruth knew why. Her month was finished. The Denver fare was still folded in her trunk, untouched. She had made no promise. He had not asked. The children went inside to stack readers, leaving the adults in the gold light by the school door. Elias removed his hat. "Miss Larkin," he said, and the formality made her heart beat faster than any sweet word could have. "You have your wages, you have your fare, you have a school that will stand whether I stand here or not." "Yes. I would like to court you if you are willing, not because I paid $2, not because the children need you, not because the school does. Because when you walk into a room, I want to become truer than I was before you entered it. Because you make family feel frightening and possible instead of only gone. Because I want you at my table and at my side and still free enough to tell me no." Ruth's eyes blurred. She hated that they did and loved that he did not reach to wipe the tears away as if they belonged to him. "That was several questions," she said. "I have been saving them." She laughed once unsteady. Then she took the Denver envelope from her pocket and placed it on the school desk behind her. Not returned to him, not destroyed, placed where she could pick it up if she chose. "Ask one," she said. Elias' breath caught. "May I walk you to supper after school tomorrow?" "Yes." "May I ask again after that?" "If your manners hold." His smile came slowly, and this time it did not look like a stranger on his face. Inside the schoolhouse, Millie made a delighted sound and Tom shushed her badly. Ruth pointed toward the door without looking away from Elias. "Class, spying is not a subject." Tom whispered, "It should be." Elias laughed, full and real, and the children laughed with him. Ruth felt the sound move through the schoolhouse that had once held only dust and grief. The final receipt came the next morning, not with a crowd and not with Pike watching from the road. Ruth arrived early, as teachers do. She found the schoolhouse swept, the fire laid, and the broken bell rope replaced with a new one braided from ranch cord. Elias stood beside it with both children, his hat in his hands. "We did not ring it," Millie said. "It is your school." Ruth looked at the rope. A month earlier, a man had held up $2 and asked who wanted the tall woman. Now 3 people stood waiting for her to begin a day they had helped make possible. She touched the rope, then let it go. "It is our school," she said. "Tom, you ring first. Millie, you count the strokes. Mr. Vale, you may carry in the wood." Elias' eyes warmed at the title, at the task, at the place she had given him that was neither owner nor rescuer. Tom rang the bell. It sounded cracked, stubborn, and alive. Children came over the ridge with slates under their arms. Families waved from wagons. Ruth stood in the doorway and watched them come, tall enough to see the road, free enough to leave it, and wanted enough to stay. After the lesson, when no one needed anything from her for one quiet minute, Elias set a tin cup of coffee on the porch rail and waited at the bottom step until she chose to come down. Subscribe for more clean, romantic Wild West stories where rejected women, lonely ranchers, and brave frontier hearts find home. Ruth picked up her cup, took the place beside him, and pulled the schoolhouse door closed from the outside only after every child had gone safely home.